rap and book tour as she does new claims that she and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, aren't speaking, and he was heartsick over the book.
Over the book, not that they're not speaking. It's all in the soon-to-be-released book called All Out War, the Plot to Destroy Trump.
All right, the author, Ed Klein, joins us right now. All right, Ed, we're about
to
talk about the relationship of Bill and Hillary regarding the publication of this book. But first, what are your sources?
One of my sources, I've got sources both with Bill and his inner circle and also with Hillary. I've been using these sources for 10 or 12 years already, so they've always proved correct.
Where's the tension?
The tension is that, listen, these two have been in the past not talking, like with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but I think this time it's more important. And as I say in this new book, All Out War, he went to her a month before the election and said, look, I've done inner polling, my own polling, and it shows that you are losing this election. She said, you're nuts. Everybody tells me I'm winning. He said, you're not polling, number one. They stopped polling.
True.
And number two, you haven't spent any time in the Rust Belt states. And she said, you know, you don't understand modern data collection techniques, Bill. You're really out of touch. And basically, she called him an old fool. And she didn't listen to him. And then when she wrote the book, she gave him 2 boxes full of these manuscripts, and he took a red pencil to it and tried to edit the book, and she would have nothing to do with it. And he told her she looked angry and out of touch, and she wouldn't listen to him.
We asked her time and time again to come on our show, and she refused to do it. And some of her people, some of the people that have worked for her for a long time that I'm friends with, have said that was one of her biggest mistakes, because we have a lot of independents that watch our show, and she could have gotten some of those votes. Now, I've heard they don't live together. What's the latest with them?
They haven't lived together for a long time. Once in a while, they got together for photo ops and things like that, but he spends almost half his time down in his library
He's got an apartment on the last floor, right?
He's got a penthouse apartment in Little Rock. He has parties there often. She doesn't know what his personal life is, and they actually haven't talked about their personal lives, but they've been on the phone together for years and years talking about politics. But now that she's lost, it looks to me like the Clinton dynasty is over, and they don't have much to talk about anymore.
Well, it looks like he was right, and her campaign team which was the most expensive ever assembled in world history, they blew it.
You know, Charlie Rose once called Bill Clinton the greatest political animal of our time, and he is.
Right.
He really is. He's brilliant, and she would not listen to him.
Harvey Weinstein, talk about this relationship and the disingenuousness that I think I picked up 2 days ago when she finally spoke about it 5 days into one of the biggest scandals I can remember.
Now, the Clintons were very close, as you know, to Harvey Weinstein. He gave her tons and tons of money. Bill Clinton hung out with Harvey in Hollywood with all the girls and so forth. They knew about this, as did almost everybody, by the way, in Hollywood. I knew about Harvey Weinstein years ago. I mean, it was not a secret, and it certainly wasn't a secret to the Clintons.
Well, one of the things Mrs. Clinton said was, of course, I'll return the money, but I can't, there's nobody to return the money to there.
Yeah, well, you know, she could take the money and give it to
the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, exactly. right, where it always goes anyway, right?
What has happened to the Clinton Foundation since the election?
Nobody's donating to it anymore. Why should they?
No influence.
When they were possibly going back to the White House and could do FCC and FDA and all these regulatory things for people, tons and tons of money flowed into the Clinton Foundation. Now there's no reason for it.
Is it true that he threw her book in the trash can?
Yes. When she said, you know, you are an old fool, you don't know what you're talking about, he took these boxes of manuscripts and he threw them in the trash.
Well, to me, that isn't exactly the pillow talk you're used to between couples.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. All right, Ed Klein, we'll look forward to your book coming out in a couple of weeks.
We did reach out to her campaign. Oh, sorry. We're going to talk about the book, but we did reach out to her campaign, and they declined a comment. But congratulations on the new book.
Thank you very much.
When does it come out?
October 30th.
October 30th.
And it's
So we can pre-order it now.
on Amazon right now.
Okay, good
What's the name?
It's called All Out War, the Plot to Destroy Trump.
All right.
There you go.
I didn't even pick that up. It seems to be going so smoothly.
Well, former President Bill Clinton was an elector, and he cast his vote today for his wife, Hillary Clinton. She, of course, did not win. But that has not stopped him from pointing the finger and blaming just about everybody other than Hillary herself. Here now is David Goodfriend, an attorney and Democratic strategist who worked for Bill Clinton in the White House. David, it's great to see you.
Thanks again for having me on, Tucker.
Well, it's my pleasure. So the former president said yesterday in an interview with a Westchester, New York newspaper that the reason his wife lost, brace yourself, angry white men. So two questions. One, isn't he an angry white man? And two, if some Republican got up and said, Obama got elected because angry black women voted for him, people would say, well, that correctly, they would say that's racist. You can't say that. Why do people get away with this angry white men stuff? I never have understood that.
Now, forgive me, I'm still loyal to my former boss.
Yes.
I'm trying to be a good guy here.
Yeah.
I went back and looked at the numbers when you invited me to come on the show to talk about this.
Right.
And what I found was that Donald Trump and Mitt Romney got almost exactly the same number of white male votes, the same proportion that is. Hillary Clinton got a lower proportion by about 7 points than Barack Obama did. So I love my former boss, President Clinton, but I think that in this case, it was equally a story about a lack of turnout among some of our core constituencies and some of the really important swing states. I don't think, in other words, that it presents a complete picture, what he said. Now, that having been said, he then glossed over something that I think is much more relevant, and you've been focusing on it on your show. He said, yeah, and then there was the FBI and the Russians. Well, hold on a second. We've got John McCain, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, saying, hey, we need to focus on the fact that a foreign country tried to interfere with our election.
Okay, but
that ought to be something we can talk about.
Can we be how real do you want to be? So apparently our intel community, to the extent we can suss out what they actually did.
And the Greenwald segment was interesting on that.
It is, and Greenwald's no conservative, just for the record.
Not. No, that's right.
But it is believed that the Russians started their hacking of the respective committees before Donald Trump announced for president.
Right.
Okay, so there is constant hacking of American institutions in the private and public sectors. This is just ridiculous.
Well, but
can I just read you some numbers I think are really interesting?
I think we ought to at least have hearings about it. I think that's not a bad
that's
idea.
fine, but let's stop with this McCarthyite nonsense.
The hearings would actually tamp down, I think,
maybe. I don't know. Since Obama's election in 2008, the Democratic Party has lost 11 Senate seats, 63 House seats, 12 governorships, and more than 800 state legislative seats. So there is a problem here that goes beyond the Russians, the Electoral College, angry white men. Is anyone in the Democratic Party going to assess that? Maybe Obama is not a good thing for the Democratic Party. 800 legislative seats?
Well, look, I'm a good Democrat. I think our party stands for a lot of good things, but I also think that introspection and kind of figuring things out is really important. For example, in 2012, we had this post-mortem effort at the RNC. Bravo. I think that was well done, and clearly they learned something from it. I'm not sure it was the right thing, but they learned something from it.
They totally ignored that stupid autopsy, and Trump did his own thing and won.
Well, that's a good point. I actually think in this case, we've seen in this country all kinds of massive swings from one way to the other. There was a time when Democrats ran everything after the New Deal for decades.
That's true.
Okay? I happen to think in this case we've sort of reached peak Republican. And I think that now we're going to see a healthy introspection and change in the Democratic Party. Look, Bernie Sanders almost won this thing.
I know.
Don't forget. He was not supposed to show up at all, and he almost won the nomination.
The real election rigging was the DNC rigging the election against him. Can I ask you a question then?
Yeah, go ahead. I would disagree with that.
He ran on an economic message.
True.
That was the only thing he had was an economic. I disagree with it, but it was a real message.
And it connected.
Yeah, it did. Trump's economic message was you're getting shafted by a system that's created to exclude you, okay?
Very similar.
Very similar. What's the Democratic Party's economic message? I
happen to think it's going to be the center of gravity is going to be right where Bernie Sanders was, and I hope
and where Trump was.
And where Trump was. That's right. I absolutely think that's true. And listen to me. Here's the thing. Now the Republicans are in charge of everything, and we get to see will it work. Donald Trump seems to be naming people that look more like a George W. Bush administration, which didn't turn out too well.
In some ways, yeah.
I am kind of hoping that he's a success because I come from a state that's been hammered, Wisconsin, where I hope people get jobs. But now the proof is going to be in the pudding. And this is where Democrats like me get to say, okay, you won. You're in charge of everything. All those state houses, all those legislatures, both houses of Congress, the White House. Let's see you produce. That's kind of where we got to be.
It's just interesting what you just said. I think you're right. But it's interesting what you just said, that Bernie ran on the system is rigged, Trump ran on the system is rigged, and now Democrats will be stealing Trump's economic message. Amazing.
I happen to think that Trump stole our economic message.
Maybe
but
he
that's
did.
Another conversation.
David Goodfriend, thanks a lot for joining us.
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Hillary Clinton and her inner circle seem to be doing a whole lot of finger pointing. Now, I understand it's kind of heartbreaking when you lose a close election, 40,000 voters if they had changed in those 3 Rust Belt states, and she'd be the next president. The press, you would expect to be doing a lot of analysis and commentary on what's happened to the Democratic Party, because now with Hillary Clinton losing, Republicans controlling both houses of Congress, Republicans having won a number of governorships, this is a really bad situation for the Dems. And there's been some of that, but I think that Donald Trump and his transition and his Twitter and his cabinet picks and all of that have so overwhelmed the media environment that this whole other area about the Clinton defeat has kind of almost vanished into history. So here you have Hillary Clinton herself telling a bunch of rich donors in Manhattan that Vladimir Putin had a personal beef with her, and that was the reason for the hacking, but which also was an attack on our democracy. Now, both things may be true. It may well be true that Putin wanted to see Donald Trump win. Trump was talking about a more cooperative relationship with Russia, that he didn't like Hillary. And there's no question that the Russian hacking, if indeed it was Russian hacking, had some effect. But I don't think it's what caused Hillary Clinton to lose the election. Bill Clinton talked to a local reporter up there in the Chappaqua area, and he said a couple things. One, that Donald Trump doesn't know much, says the former president, but he knows how to get the votes of angry white men. Interesting that Bill would say that, because Bubba knew how to get the votes of rednecks, and I say that in the most charming possible way, and that's part of why he was successful as a more moderate Democrat, as opposed to the liberals in the party when he won in 1992 and 1996. Bill Clinton also blamed James Comey. And again, you know, in a close election, you can pick any one thing and say, well, this is the reason that the election turned the other way. It didn't help Hillary Clinton's candidacy that Comey, after having cleared her 2 weeks before the election, came out and said he was re-examining the whole situation because of what turned out to be nothing in the FBI's view. Lots and lots of emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop because of Huma Abedin and the estranged marriage there. But, you know, 2 points on this. One is that if Hillary Clinton hadn't used a private server, there would have been no Comey investigation. And secondly, did that move so many votes? Did it remind people of why they didn't like Hillary Clinton? You know, it's kind of an impossible question to answer. And finally, Vanity Fair reporting that a lot of unnamed Democrats in the Clinton orbit are blaming Huma Abedin or other members of the inner circle for what was a very cautious campaign. But that gets a little closer to what really happened here. Hillary Clinton didn't have a strong message other than Donald Trump is kind of crazy and I'm not Donald Trump. She didn't, as you know, campaign in Wisconsin, only went to Michigan at the end, you know, just assumed that she would win those Rust Belt states, and that turned out to have been the election. She didn't really have much of a core message either for the working class white voters who probably gave the election to Donald Trump, or just about anyone else. I mean, she had lots of position papers, but she was never able to boil it down. And she was so hyper cautious. And lots of people coming out now and saying, well, I asked her to be on my show, but she just wouldn't do it. Rachel Maddow, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, said she tried throughout the whole campaign to get Hillary Clinton to come on. And there are lots of other examples of that. So Hillary ran a hyper cautious campaign, didn't have a strong message, didn't campaign in the key Rust Belt states, and in a changed election, she was sort of the incumbent, the status quo, the third term for President Obama. That's why she lost. All this other stuff, it's fun or entertaining or interesting to point the fingers and look at the Russians and Putin and Comey and all of that. But it came down to the fact that Donald Trump won this election and Hillary Clinton lost it because she ran a lousy campaign.